working for you. A weekly talk radio program which highlights developments of national interest and the activities of your St. Kitts Nevis government. Join host Roy Williams as he presents news, views, reports, and interviews about everything regarding the activities of the Team Unity government and the building of our communities and the development of St. Kitts Nevis. Tune in and call in to interact with your government and share your views regarding the upward forward development of your community and our beautiful Twin Island Federation. Working for You is weekly, every Wednesday live from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. on ZIZ Radio, Win FM, and Sugar City FM with rebroadcast on participating stations. Working for You.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Working for You, the weekly radio program that provides the people of St. Kitts and Nevis with the opportunity to interact with their government. I am Daniela MacPhail, your host for today, as Mr. Roy Williams is off on assignment. Over the past few weeks, we understand that persons have been quite concerned, somewhat fearful about criminal activity. That is understandable, but following a meeting with the High Command on Monday, the Acting Minister of National Security, the Honorable Ian Patches Liburd, asserted that the Government of National Unity remains committed to the fight against crime. Let's hear a clip from that meeting.
We must stress that the general public too has a part to play, and it's just not up to the security forces. In this regard, persons must report suspicious activities they observed in their communities. And once the information is forthcoming, then the security forces will respond. The hotlines that the police has established, they are still operational. And there's also the Crime Stoppers program, which you can give information to without disclosing your identity. And all of this should help the general public in understanding what the security forces are doing and increase your confidence in the security forces. What our people must understand, it is impossible to have a police officer or a soldier on every corner of every street. It's impossible. And police officers, defense force personnel, they do need rest. They do have to go on vacation. They do get sick. We try our very best to police the areas. When I use the term police, I mean in general, to police and patrol these areas to ensure that our citizens can rest at night knowing that we are out there. But I don't want people to get the impression that there will be a police officer and there will be a soldier on the street on every corner. A lot of the operations which we conduct is intelligence driven. If there's a spike in crime in a particular area, obviously we have to increase operations in those areas. In addition to that, we have to analyze what is happening island-wide and move resources around accordingly. So the public have to understand that this is what we're doing. And we may not get it right every single time, but we are trying. And as one British military officer said, in relations to terrorist opportunities or activities, the security forces, they have to try and be successful every time. A terrorist only have to be successful once. And this is what you're seeing in the Federation. A lot of times we tend to ignore the period of calm. But when there's an incident or there are 2 or 3 incidents in quick succession, then there's this big hype. And we ignore and forgot the successes of the security forces during the period when there was a calm. So all I can do is ask our people to continue to support the security forces, pass information when information is at hand, and there are means by which you can do so anonymously. And I know that the police is making an effort to have the district police get more involved on foot in their various communities so as to build up these sort of relations. And once the community interacts with the police, I am positive that we can make a big difference.
We thank Lieutenant Colonel Patrick Wallace of the St. Kitts and Nevis Defense Force for those comments. He assured us that the St. Kitts and Nevis remain safe, but we as the general public, we have to assist the security forces in the fight against crime. This afternoon, our guest is none other than the Acting Minister of National Security, the Honorable Ian Patches Liburd. Good afternoon, Mr. Liburd. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Jamie, and always a pleasure to be on working for you. It's my third or fourth time, and I always thank God as well for the opportunity to not only serve my people in East Bastia, but the entire population of the Federation. And the opportunity to account for my stewardship is always welcome. Thank you, and good afternoon to your listening and viewing audience.
Well, as I said, it's a pleasure to have you here, especially in the wake of what has been happening recently. Now, we know that the public is concerned, as I said before, but coming out of the meeting that you had with the High Command on Monday, your message was all is not lost. Can you share some more with us?
Well, I can say that the police to date has made some inroads in terms of addressing and arresting this spate of burglaries and robberies, because today I know that they have made some inroads. I say that that should be suffice for now, because you would know that these are operational matters, and I'm sure that
an ongoing investigation.
Right, and the Royal St. Christopher Nevis Police Force would make their pronouncements in due time. Right? In the process as well, would like to again convey profound condolences on behalf of the entire Team Unity Administration, on behalf of our Prime Minister, who is on top of things and in tune as well. He returns this afternoon, so my stays now being short-lived as the Acting Minister of National Security. I mentioned before that I visited the hospital to see the victims of that shooting incident in Sadler's, and I'm happy to report that one individuals seem to be recovering well. Okay. I must make, I think it would be remiss of me if I did not speak again to the irresponsible statements coming from the leader of the opposition and the former Prime Minister, Dr. Denzel Llewellyn Douglas. It is so irresponsible, and one ought to expect better from Dr. Douglas when he's trying to use this incident or the incidents of last week for political gain. And these insidious attempts at trying to personally destroy our leader, number one, won't get any place. Because I said at one forum that a politician said to me that people in St. Kitts Nevis have a 3-day syndrome. And when I asked about the meaning, the politician said to me that after 3 days we forget. Unless Dr. Douglas has forgotten, or perhaps he has a 3-day syndrome, he would recall, unless he's going senile, that under his watch as Prime Minister of this country, we were unfortunately labeled as the murder capital of the world. During his tenure as Prime Minister, we recorded over 200 murders under Dr. Douglas. At one stage, remember, over on the Strip, sadly, we had 3 murders in one night. But again, I will say that I am not one who drives by looking in the rearview mirror. Looking forward, things are going to be positive. And I do not believe, and I will not attempt to make crime a political issue. But I needed to address that once again. Dr. Douglas must insist on making crime a political issue, especially in light of the track record that he has left us here in St. Kitts and Nevis. He would have left a legacy of doing nothing when it relates to crime. But the police are working, as I said. I've been advised that they have made some inroads into the armed robberies and burglaries of us last week and before, and I'm sure that the police would make their announcements shortly.
Minister Liburd, we thank you for those statements, and we are grateful that the police are working. In fact, this morning while I was on my way to work, I recognized that the police were placed in strategic places doing stop and searches. And many times we criticize the police. Everything happens, we say, oh, the police not doing what they're supposed to be doing. But we do have to recognize that police are human beings and that they are putting their lives at risk for each and every one of us. And we know that they work hard, so we must commend them as well. Now, I want to move on from that segment because, you have ministries that you are directly responsible for, and you are the Minister of Public Infrastructure, correct?
That's correct.
So I wanted to speak about that because we have a packed show for this afternoon. Now, the first thing that comes to mind in terms of public infrastructure was the recent opening of the Sir Kennedy Highway Tunnel. We know the tunnel has been closed for some time. There was a road detour, and that was reopened, in fact, last Friday. So, do you care to comment about that for me?
Well, we are happy, and I personally was happy to be part of that exercise. As you recall, that Southeast Peninsula Road was constructed way back, I think, in 1989. That's some 26 years or 27 years ago. And I also recall, as I said, and in another forum as well, I recall my days of trotting through the mountains there to pick grapes and to trap pond birds, and you probably won't know about something we call the fat pork, the nice fruit that we got from the trees there, and to be part of an exercise that opened a tunnel that indemnifies, that protects people from rockfall, and a mudslide as a result of weathering. I think it's something that touched me because Sir Kennedy Simmons, whom the highway is named after, and when he had the vision to construct the road, I also recall that it was referred by Dr. Douglas and his surrogates as the road to nowhere. So to see that this Dr. Simmons, 27 years after, cut the ribbon to open that tunnel, it was really touching, and to show you how God works in mysterious ways. So the tunnel is open. There's some sundry minor things to be done in terms of lighting and other things. It's properly marked. It's the reflectors are there, but the entire road, I must say, the project starts from the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and there's a portion of that road still to be resurfaced, but it goes right down onto Majors Bay, or what we call the Sea Bridge, and that is substantially completed. There's some sundry minor works done as well as it relates to the guardrails and some finishing markings, but that is a showpiece, and that has opened up some other areas for us because we inherited as well a crumbling public infrastructure from the displaced, and as my Prime Minister would say, maladjusted leaders on the other side. Because if you go around the country, you see the roads are dilapidated in some parts, right? Mm-hmm. And one thing we promised when we came, or before we came to office, one thing we committed to is that we were not going to leave roads to political expediency. Because in the past, you would have known when an election is due. When an election was due, some $25 million or $30 million contract would have been announced and awarded. But we're not going to wait for that. We believe we have an obligation to motorists, to drivers, to pedestrians to ensure that we have safe and decent roads, if I can use that term. So we are going around the country, patching where necessary, resurfacing where necessary, and there is going to be announced in due time a project where over perhaps a 3-year period we can look at resurfacing the entire Island Main Road. And don't forget as well the Old Road Bay. Mm-hmm. I am strongly of the view if the Douglas Labour administration would have agreed to spend $5 million for that tunnel there on the Dr. Simmons Highway, why has he ignored the people across Old Road Bay? Not just the people across Old Road Bay, but that's an area that's traversed daily. People even from his area in St. Paul's come right up, and we from Basset who go down. And we've seen mudslide. People have even died across that road from rockfall. And that too is a project that we are going to give priority. I can assure the people of the Federation that's my commitment to you.
Fantastic, and this speaks to the Team Unity administration sticking to their promises and delivering for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. Now, I wanted to move on from roads and go to the situation in Venezuela. Now, you know, Venezuela has been in the news quite often recently. Now, the people of St. Kitts and Nevis have benefited quite a bit from the relationship between St. Kitts and Nevis and Venezuela. So, Minister, before we get to the ALBA agreement and the Petrocaribe agreement, I know that you are traveling to Venezuela this week, correct?
You got your intelligence right.
Yes, I did my homework.
Yeah, in fact, there's the 16th Ministerial Council meeting of Petrocaribe that will be convened this coming Friday in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. And the agenda is quite interesting, irrespective of what is happening in Venezuela, because in fact the agenda would speak to strategic and policy vision for the consolidation of Petrocaribe Energy cooperation agreement for the next 10 years, and obviously strengthening the regional energy security and sovereignty between 2016 and 2025. We're looking at that renewable energy development also. We will have presentations from Petrocaribe member countries in incorporating national and renewable energy in the energy matrix of the member countries of Petrocaribe. You just would have learned that President Maduro just came or just visited Trinidad and Tobago, and they were talking about natural gas and development and cooperation in that area. So, yes, there's a meeting coming this Friday in Venezuela.
Okay, let's just go to the situation in Venezuela. Do you care to comment as to the implications of that situation to St. Kitts and Nevis? Because, to be frank, we know that we have arrangements with that government. So, we have heard in the news from persons in St. Kitts and Nevis, people commenting saying that, yes, we owe Venezuela money, and the persons in Venezuela are suffering as a result of the grants that they have given us. Now, I was recently made aware of a large sum of money owed to the joint venture company, PDV. In fact, the documentation that I saw showed that for the period of 2009 to 2011, St. Kitts and Nevis owes near $5 million US. We also owe for 2009 to 2015 some $500,000, well, around $500,000, that is US dollars, and 2011 some 5,000 US dollars. Is there any veracity to these figures?
Well, there's no real veracity. In fact, you are understating the figures. So, in fact, it is 45 million US dollars. I do have that information here. As a matter of fact, and I hate to seem to be dwelling on Dr. Douglas, right? Because I heard a comment from him just over the weekend when he was talking about monies that we got from Venezuela when we got to office, and through the kind-heartedness and courtesy of President Maduro in our very first bilateral meeting with the Venezuelans, our astute Prime Minister, Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris, was in a matter of minutes, he secured a $6 million US grant to pay the sugar workers who were abused and misused by Dr. Douglas. That was a grant. We also had an agreement whereby the Venezuelan government, through PDV, which is the joint venture company here in St. Kitts and Nevis, to provide housing solution in St. Kitts. One area that was looked at is the area on Wellington Road and West Street, which is in my constituency. And there is an agreement as it relates to development of that project. But you spoke to veracity. And the truth is, the Dr. Douglas Labour NRP administration got supplies from the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Having signed the Petrocaribe Agreement in 2005, and I walked with a copy of that agreement. And if the cameraman Giles is really on the ball, you will see President Chavez's signature here, right? And you will see Dr. Douglas's signature right here on the agreement, right? So 2005, they agreed to enter into this Petrocaribe Agreement, signed on September the 6th, 2005. This is the signature of Dr. Douglas. This is the signature of the late Hugo Chavez. Now,
okay, let's go back.
Yes.
Right? You are saying in 2005 the
Yes.
agreement was signed.
yes.
What were we expected to gain from that agreement?
Well, we were expected to gain cash relief. So, because based on how the agreement is written, right, first of all, the government of Venezuela agreed to supply crude oil, refined products, and LPG, which is liquid propane gas, I think that is, and the energy equivalents of the government of Federation at about 700 barrels per day on an annual basis. Now, directly to your question, the government of Venezuela, right, supplied quotas in the agreement, in that it provided what it called grant financing or a grant financing scheme, right, for all the countries who were signatory to the agreement, and St. Kitts and Nevis were. There was a 2-year grace period for capital payments and an annual interest rate of up to 2%. Now, The amount of the applicable finance resources and the relevant period was determined according to a particular scale. If the price of fuel went over, on the world price, over $40 per barrel, then it's kicking. Now, the cash portion had to be paid within 90 days of the date of the bill laden. Bill laden means once it's loaded in Venezuela, you start to calculate 90 days from when it's landed here in St. Kitts, right? And no interest would be paid on the first 30 days.
Okay.
Now, an interest rate of 2% per annum was applied on the remaining 90 days, right? Now, as I said, in the event that the price of a barrel exceeded $40, then the payment was extended to 23 years plus a 2-year grace period. So you'll pay at 25 years at a 1% interest rate.
Okay.
Now, in spite of that,
Did
under
we pay?
no, Dr. Douglas's administration. This is what we inherited. These are the facts. These were agreed and signed off by the Ministry of Finance. Between the period of 2009 to 2011, right, SCED, which is the St. Kitts Electricity Department, racked up, our government that is, racked up a debt of some $45,212,838. $12,838 that should be. The Public Works Department, which gets what we call asphalt or bitumen as part of the agreement, racked up between 2009 and when we got into office in 2015, $320,820. Now, you had an agriculture, which you spoke to, the public works utilities, just about $5,000, and the public works division, some $52,000. So they never paid those monies. Never. He got all this product, and his administration, Dr. Douglas' administration, never paid a cent, right? And we had so much money in the SIDF and elsewhere, but he never even paid a cent. So what has happened now is that this debt is really still related. It's past. We cannot even negotiate a discount on the debt, because what has happened, PDVSA, right, which is the state-owned oil and gas company, right, was paid by the local joint venture company, which is PDV, which is the Venezuelan government and the St. Kitts Nevis government. They've paid that money on behalf of the government. So that money is paid to the state-owned oil company. So what we are doing now is negotiating a way out of settling this debt. Settling this debt, and we've been discussing the terms. And the good thing about this, that it will come back to the PDV and come back to us, that we can use for our social development programs, because it is in fact a social development fund. So what we are trying to do is ensure that the fund remains healthy. So we have decided to have two components. One, a non-reimbursable component, which means that the monies will go for social development that will come back, and a reimbursable component whereby we can issue loans and have the money amortized over a particular period. But yes, there are difficulties there in Venezuela, and our hearts and our minds are with them. We have, apart from our trading agreement we have with them, we also have diplomatic relations with the Venezuelan government, and I'm happy to report that I even spoke with the ambassador. We have a resident ambassador here in St. Kitts, Ambassador Romulo, and he's optimistic and highly optimistic that within the next 6 months or so things will turn around in Venezuela, and that made me feel pretty happy. But you asked me our view. I support the as one politician put it, the traditional I support what we call traditional democracy. And in Venezuela, the democracy is on show, where we had a change in National Assembly, but don't lose sight of the fact that President Maduro was democratically elected.
Correct.
And we support that. And we are friends of Venezuela. And we will be friends of Venezuela forever, I believe.